Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Pharmacist Diaries podcast. I'm super excited today because one question I get asked all the time is from international pharmacy students or pharmacists who are living abroad. A lot of people actually contact me from countries such as India, Australia, New Zealand to ask how can I come and live in the UK and how can I come and work as a pharmacist in the UK. So I have a treat for you guys today. I have a guest whose name is Brijesh Thaker. He is a pharmacist here in the UK and has been working here for over 17 years as a pharmacist and a business owner. He owns 4 independent pharmacies, and we're going to talk all about his journey from traveling to India to the UK in 2007. Now, his plan wasn't to become a pharmacist initially, but this story will unwind as we get into the episode. He came here to do a master's degree, and his story into pharmacy unfolds because he decides to sign up for the OSPAP program and become a qualified pharmacist here in the UK. So I'm really excited to dive into this episode. We're going to talk all about that kind of transfer from one country to another. We're going to talk about the program itself in terms of OSPAP. And we're going to dive into Brijesh's story in terms of becoming a pharmacy owner, because this isn't something that we've talked about on the podcast before. So I'm really excited to learn a little bit about becoming a community pharmacy owner and what that journey is like. It's something that I find personally quite overwhelming to think, oh my gosh, like it's such a massive amount of money that you might take out big loans. Pharmacies are really expensive. It's a lot of responsibility. So for me, it's really nice to hear that journey from him. And I'm sure there's lots of pharmacists out there who are watching this or listening to this episode who would like to know what it's like to go into pharmacy ownership. So welcome, Brijesh, to the podcast. Hello.
Hi, Anisha. Thanks for having me on your podcast. And as you said, some of what we discussed, hopefully students from overseas or pharmacists who are here might find useful.
I'm so excited. Why don't we dive into, I guess, your journey from living in India and what your initial kind of thoughts were coming over to the UK to do a master's in pharmaceutical sciences and what your original plans were, and then dive into sort of how that unfolded, where you made that transition and that change in terms of becoming a pharmacist instead.
So I was a pharmacist, overseas pharmacist. I completed my bachelor's in pharmacy, it's what it's called in India, in 2006. So I had 2 choices. One was to go, so I was living in Gujarat, as part of India, where I would have had to go to a different state to do my master's, or I could come to UK and do my master's in pharmaceutical science. Surprisingly, the cost would have been the same. But my approach was, if I was to do that in UK, I'm gaining new skills. I'm getting experience from working in a different country. And that degree, pharmaceutical science, I could have used that in the UK to get a job in industry. So I was hoping to get a job in Pfizer or one of those leading industries. So that's what my thought process was, to get enrolled onto the pharmaceutical science course and to come over to the UK. But whilst I was doing the course, I was trying to fund my own tuition fees because I really wanted to be independent and didn't want to borrow more money from my parents. So whilst I was studying, I was working in different areas, different jobs. One of them was working in a community pharmacy. So I landed myself a job as a Christmas temp, wearing a nice Christmas hat and working in Superdrug. So I really liked what I was doing there. And one of the pharmacists, who I'm sure wouldn't mind mentioning his name, Ravin, he recognized the potential in me. And he said, look, instead of doing what you're doing, why don't you look into doing a conversion course? You've studied pharmacy for 4 years in India already. Would need to do 1 year's course, and then you do pre-reg and you can become a pharmacist in the UK. So that concept really attracted me. So I researched more into it. And then I went on to this journey where I decided to do the OSPAP course and then do my pre-reg training and then start working as a pharmacist.
Interesting. So just for people who aren't aware, the OSPAP course is the Overseas Pharmacist Assessment Programme. So Are there multiple universities that you can do this with, or is it a specific place that you kind of sign up to the program?
So currently there's 4 unis they offer this course. The whole process starts with applying to GPHC to do this course. GPHC will assess your syllabus in whichever country you've done your course in, compare that with what somebody who's studying in the UK would have learned. And if those syllables are comparable, then as long as you have a good standing in the country that you've graduated from, because they would need to send that over to GPHC to confirm that, then you can go on to then do the OSPAP course. The second part of the process is basically completing English language test. So if you are from one of those countries where you would need to demonstrate that you have command over English, you would have to do either IELTS, or I think there's a different module for different course. So you do one of those, show the test results, submit that along with your applications to GPHC. Once that's assessed, you would have 2 years grace period where you would need to get admission and start your OSPAP course. I did mine with Brighton Uni, but I know there's 3 other universities and they're on the GPHC website where you can do this course from.
Perfect. And is it full time that you do it for the year? And also, how much does it cost? Because I think that would be quite useful for people to know as well.
So I think the course fees varies. When I did it, I think it was in the excess of £11,000, but I think it's a bit more now. The number of days that you go into uni also varies, because some unis offer like a flip learning module for what you're learning. So you're going in few days, but the rest days you would basically use your own time to do the learning. So I think at Brighton Uni, I wasn't required to go every single day. So that fitted really well with my lifestyle and the fact that I needed to still work. So I could use my evenings and weekends and try and get my study done, but also try and work the rest hours to support myself as well.
Awesome. And what was it like actually moving to the UK? What were your thoughts at the time in terms of the lifestyle, being able to work and study, like, the culture differences, food differences, lots of other things. What was it like for you as an international citizen?
Yeah, I think compared to like a lot of students, like I think everybody else would probably say the same thing. When you have studied overseas and come over to the UK, it's going to be a little bit of a culture shock because you are in a different country. So, for example, working in the pharmacy was completely different environment for me, because within India, you wouldn't need a prescriptions like to the same extent like how you would have. It's not highly regulated market. The pharmacists are not as appreciated in India. So just to know when you come over here, walking into a community pharmacy, what pharmacists can offer over here was actually really overwhelming. And I really like that as well. But to touch on the other subjects as well, so like say food, so that was one of the biggest problems like that you would find when you come to the UK, because you wouldn't find Indian food easily. So I came over here with 3 of my friends, all of us doing the same course, staying in the same place because we hired the same flat that we were living in. So for us, it was all a journey where we were all learning together. We were all finding work. We were all supporting each other. At some point, we had like money left on the table, whoever was earning first, and they would basically take the money if whoever needed it, and they would put the money back in when they could. So really appreciated the support that I had with my friends, because at points where I wasn't earning, I got the support from them and vice versa. But yeah, overall, it was really like overwhelming initially. But the fact that I was with my friends, it helped me.
I mean, moving countries is tough. It's not an easy journey. I've done it before myself. I lived in the US, lived in the UAE, and at different stages of my life. I lived in America when I was a teenager, so it was around the age of 15. So I did high school there and my first degree before pharmacy. And then obviously I got married and moved to Dubai and Abu Dhabi with my husband. And that was a completely different transition. I love that you came over with your friends, because knowing that you've got company and people around you and that support, even from a financial perspective, must have given you, a little bit of relief not to have to, I guess, worry, because you've got a little bit of a support network. You've got the company, you've got people to have dinner with, because even these types of things, it can be quite lonely, right? If you're working or studying and you get home to a flat which you live in by yourself, it can be lonely in terms of just day-to-day routine. But you lived in Brighton, which is quite a bustling big city. So I guess a good opportunity for you to meet lots of people. In London, we're quite fortunate that we've got access to so many different types of cultures and foods, and even doing Indian food shopping is so easy now, because there are so many local shops and kind of places that you can go to buy Indian food. But I don't know if Brighton is similar now, but back then maybe not so much.
Yeah, I think it's changed a bit now. It's slightly more easier. But when I came over, I was actually staying just outside Croydon, so comparatively, it was still better compared to Brighton. But it's still not quite the same. So yeah, but having friends with you could take turns in cooking, which obviously would help. Financially, it helped initially as well. It's just the moral support as well, because when you're going through that phase when you're in a new country, and you're doing this course, which is obviously demanding, you're obviously trying to be financially independent. You're learning your way around how to be in a different country and still find job and find ways to basically be happy with yourself as well. So all of that, it was really helpful that I had my friends around with me at the same time. Um, but it's not to say like it's not hard. But I could just imagine somebody coming over from a different country initially. It would be hard, but I could say that it's actually rewarding as well, because it pushes you into areas that you wouldn't normally be. So if you're in your comfort zone, you wouldn't learn those skills, how to be flexible, how like things will be challenging, but how you sort of like mold, and the resilience that you get out of it. I think that's quite invaluable.
Absolutely. I mean, I've loved traveling and I love exploring new cultures, new ways of working. We've lived in loads of different locations, even when we were in Abu Dhabi, from a tiny studio apartment to an amazing, beautiful 2-bedroom flat on the Palm in Dubai. And so, we've really enjoyed that journey of trying new things and exploring and being adventurous and spontaneous. And without children, it is so much easier to be able to do that. I think now I love the idea of the adventure, but it's going to take a little bit more thought in terms of preparing our children to go on those adventures with us. I I love that you had that support network. I think that's really important. I think for some people it must be quite hard, because £11,000 can be quite a lot of money for someone to pay for the OSPAP program from abroad. And then the added pressure of needing to work in order to pay your bills can be quite overwhelming for some people. So, of course, if you're moving over to the UK, it would be great to be in a position where maybe you have enough savings to be able to part pay for maybe your accommodation, or some of your bills, so that pressure is removed so you can focus on just exclusively studying or part-time working, as a strategy to prepare you for that. But if you're having to work full time and be able to afford accommodation, because obviously the cost of living here is completely different to a lot of countries, especially India. I've been to India multiple times for holidays, and obviously it is so much cheaper to do everything. So that can be quite a shock to the system, I guess, for people who are coming from different countries.
Definitely. It's just like, as you said, like it's not just the tuition fee that you're thinking about. It's like day to day, like the rent, your daily expenses. Um, Initially you would have to factor in like, okay, so this is a bus journey as opposed to taking a train journey. So the train journey is going to cost you this much as opposed to a bus journey, which you can just buy a single day fare. It's going to take you longer, but how can you then utilize that time to then revise or study or do whatever you needed to do on the bus, as opposed to having the luxury of shorter commute to get somewhere. Same way, like you can have the luxury of eating out every day and you could just basically spend the money that you would have earned, or you can factor in how can you save money, and then that would be useful later on. You mentioned the tuition fee for OSPAP. So currently for OSPAP, as far as I know, with all the universities, there's more than a year or 2 years wait because the course is really oversubscribed. So somebody who's in the UK and thinking of OSPAP, if that's what you definitely want to do, why don't you start having a saving pot where you put money aside for when you actually start doing that course, so you can dedicate your time and effort to actually completing the course and not having that added pressure on yourself to work as well as study as well. I remember taking a loan because obviously being an international student, you wouldn't have the luxury of having the student loan that the government would offer. And I remember paying like something like 17 or 18% interest rate. So for me, it was important to then try and repay that early so I don't go into that. But also just the satisfaction that you get that you haven't actually borrowed money from multiple places or different people and you were self-sufficient, even though it was hard. So at one point I remember I would wake up and I would do newspaper distribution in the morning. So I was a paper boy. But I remember for me at that point, I would go on a bicycle. So I would do my exercise. I'll get fresh air. Then I would go on to work in Superdrug between 12 and 6 in the pharmacy. And when I finish, I'll go and work in Primark between 6 and 10. And then I'll go home and then I'll eat and sleep. And then same cycle repeats again. So physically and mentally it was challenging at that point, but it is rewarding. When you reflect back on it, that phase teaches you so much. So then life throws you different things and later on different phases. And you can answer anything that's thrown at you with the same thing, same attitude, that if you could do that at that pace, then anything that's thrown at you afterwards, you're going to be able to do it.
Brijesh, that is wild. Paperboy to Superdrug to Primark. That is a lot of hours, actually, and quite a lot of dedication. It showcases your willpower to make things achievable. And how many days of the week would you do that alongside the studying?
So I would focus more on those during term breaks. So during term time, I could then study and also do my part-time work that I would have been allowed to do. So the other thing that international students also need to focus is whilst you are studying, you would only be allowed to work so many hours. So for me at that point, I think it was around 20 hours a week. So it was only during term break where you could essentially work more. So it's just about being organized, trying to get all your study done. So at term break where you have the task, you have the assignments to do, you're not focusing too much of your time to do those. You might have done that already. And you're working at that time to then fund yourself, basically. And yeah.
I mean, that's a wonderful strategy, because if you are, say, working all of summer, which is at least 8 weeks, if not more, plus Christmas holidays, which is 2 to 3 weeks, Easter holidays, 2 to 3 weeks, you can build up a significant little savings pot and then calculate how long that savings is going to last you in terms of your accommodation, food, and standard bills, enjoyment, etc. And then you know how many hours you need to put in during term time to top up on that kind of cash flow. And it's really useful that you were grinding for those kind of few weeks off so that you can then have that flexibility to study when you need to without the added pressure of worrying about your finances. I think that's a really good tip for pharmacy students who aren't in the OSPAP program. I think it's a great idea for students who are just studying pharmacy, even if they're from the UK. Maybe not 3 jobs, but there's no reason why you can't work a standard 9-to-5 role anywhere in the entire summer months and during holidays. I know a few students actually who work at Stoke Mandeville Hospital, where I'm at now, where they've signed up for NHS Professionals, which is the kind of bank agency for that hospital trust. And they work as during their kind of student holidays, and they work in the dispensary, but they get paid, which is great. It's not just looking for internships or summer placements. They're an active member of staff who works, obviously, at specific times of the year. And that's really useful as well during Christmas when it's really busy in the pharmacy. And we've got that extra support that we know that they're going to come and help, but they also get amazing experience, like hands-on experience of what pharmacies really like in a hospital setting. Outside of university time, which is great. It removes that pressure of then, okay, well, I need a Saturday job, or I need more experience in community or in hospital, or how do I go and work in the industry? It gives them a chance to actually explore the working world, connect with people, build their network, and then choose whether or not they actually would like to work at that hospital as they go into their training year or as a qualified pharmacist. So that's quite exciting. Tell us a little bit more about the actual OSPAP program in terms of what are the modules like, what did you have to learn, and also how is this different from what you learnt as a pharmacy student in India as well?
So like the basics, which would be like your pharmacology, you would have learned whichever country that you are in, and that would be similar to UK. The main thing that would be different is like learning about MEP, learning about how the actual pharmacy model works in the UK, because that's different to countries like India or Pakistan or people like in Asian countries. Not that different from people who might be, say, in Australia or New Zealand. But like in Asian countries, it's completely different model. The doctors will prescribe medication based on more commonly like the commission that they are getting from the rep. And then basically the patient will then go to pharmacy that stocks that medication. More commonly would be under branded medication, and then you would pay to get that medicine. So it's just that element itself for somebody who's not from UK to come over and see there's a structure. You can only get a prescription from a registered healthcare professional, and then you can only get like those medications from the pharmacy, and you would need a prescription for it. So you would routinely see that for community pharmacists who are working in UK would see people from overseas walking up to the counter and asking for antibiotic because they would think you can get that without a prescription. So it's just about like the laws and how like the whole industry is regulated, but more importantly about the increasing value of the pharmacist itself, how pharmacists can not only dispense medications but also counsel prescriptions and patients on different medications, all those clinically like high risk medicines like that you see in hospital and in community that we as a pharmacist will focus on and then counsel the patients on. That's the added value, and that's where you feel that you're actually being recognized. So those things are different. Then that's what you would need to learn. Also about how once you become a pharmacist, the different avenues that are available for you. So in India, for example, in my case, you would have one of the three modes after you qualify as a pharmacist for in terms of career progression. You can either own a pharmacy, you can go into clinical trials, or you can work in the industry. But in the UK, like there's endless different like opportunities. You can go down so many different routes. You can become a GP pharmacist, you can be an industry pharmacist, you can be a PCN pharmacist, you can be a community pharmacist. You can also work in like private clinics which are offering recruitment for pharmacists as well. So it's just about learning about like how you're going to use your pharmacist degree and your qualification to then go into one of those streams that you would learn whilst you were basically doing your OSPAP course.
Yeah, it's a totally different ballgame. I mean, I've been on holidays to India, but I've also used hospital services and clinic services while I've been there. I do go out when I go out there, get health checks because the accessibility and the affordability of getting an all-in-one body system check is really cheap. And it's really useful knowing that I'm going out there for a few weeks and it's just one day. You spend the entire day at the hospital and all of your body systems are checked. And you get a thorough overview of where you're at, whether that's diabetes, cholesterol, heart disease, mammograms. You see the dentist, like blood tests are done. You see multiple doctors. You can get all sorts of scans done, right, in one day. And that accessibility to healthcare is really valuable as a visitor. I've used it recently as well for my son, who I thought had some interesting allergies. So I went to go and get the allergy testing simply because it was easier than waiting multiple months with the National Health Service trying to get a referral to a pediatrician and then to an allergy clinic to get the test done. And we were going on holiday there. So I thought, oh, yeah, let's just do it. Let's get it over with. And it was quite valuable from that point of view. I visited many pharmacies as well in India because it's just curiosity. I just like to go and check them out. I do sometimes buy some supplies of things that like I can get access to that I can keep in my little pharmacy cupboard at home when I'm in India. And, it's interesting that you can buy anything from steroid eye drops to colmoxiclav or any antibiotic over the counter. And just speaking to the pharmacy in terms of what their role is and what they can and can't do, it's just very interesting to see what the differences are. And when I lived in Dubai and Abu Dhabi, it was quite similar because you can buy lots over the counter there as well, where you don't necessarily need a prescription. Even things like insulin, steroid creams, even antibiotics and things like that are available that you can purchase over the counter, which is very different to the UK. So that must have been quite not overwhelming, but it's quite, it must have been quite exciting to know that actually I can do so much more with my degree and I can offer so many different services that aren't necessarily available to me as a healthcare professional in, your home country.
So that was one of the things that steered me towards doing the OSPAP course when I was contemplating which direction to go in. So as I was working in Superdrug, and then the one that I was working in, they were offering travel vaccination. They were also offering like private services, which were not offered in routinely in other pharmacies. And the pharmacist I was working with, he was like quite thorough in terms of how he was looking at each prescription and how he was counseling patients and the points that he was including in his conversations. So that sort of like made me realize that he's actually using his qualifications, and there is so much more that you could do with the degree that you've actually done overseas. So that was one of the reasons that sort of like I decided to do OSPAP. Plus, I also like the patient-facing role. So I've had experience of working now in a GP surgery, also in hospital. I actually did my pre-reg in Stoke Mandeville Hospital, now that you mentioned that. So I actually did like the community pharmacy. So having go through the whole cycle of working in the community pharmacy, then to work in the hospital in the GP role, I come back to community pharmacies because it's that feeling that you get when you've known the patient for so long and you are providing them healthcare, not just in a snapshot, because when somebody is coming to see you in the hospital, you're looking after them for the length of time that they are with you. You really get to know those patients. You really get to know like really good connections you make with them as well. So when my son was born and I was returning back from paternity leave, I couldn't go back to my pharmacy. I was stopped from the car to my pharmacy and I couldn't actually get through the door for like at least half an hour. Everyone wanted to see their pictures and ask me questions about how it was. So that part is like really rewarding. And that's what I witnessed back in those days when I was working in Superdrug, because the pharmacist knew every single person that walked through the door. And the patients that he was seeing, they had the confidence to speak to that pharmacist openly about any health concerns that they had, which I thought was really important, because like if you don't have that open dialogue, you're not going to go to the next stage of the consultation. So all of those factors sort of like at that point steered me towards doing the OSPAP course and then becoming a pharmacist in the UK, as opposed to going down the industry route. Some of my friends went down to the specials route. So that's another route that you can take if you're an overseas pharmacist, because you've got the qualifications from, so like say QA, QC side of things. So there's quite a lot of specials lab in the UK. and you've got like those transferable skills from overseas. So you don't need to be a registered pharmacist to work in those labs. So you could be involved in the manufacturing side of things. You can be involved in the QA and QC side of things. So that's another stream that you can choose to go down if you wanted to. But for me, it was about having that patient contact and using the pharmacist skills day to day, and not just limiting myself to just the supply of medications. That was the main factor that steered me into doing the course and becoming a pharmacist.
That's awesome. And I'm so glad because your journey's really evolved and you've learnt, it seems, a lot about yourself as well, because you've been through quite a lot, like moving countries, studying for a master's here, navigating the job market, the housing market with rentals, etc., making connections and friends and building your professional network, as well as signing up to a new course and then, having to do a pre-registration training year in a hospital environment, which is very different to kind of what you were used to at home. So that's really interesting. Let me ask you a little bit about, I assume that you came here with your master's degree on a student visa, but then did you have to switch visas once that course was completed, or were you able to extend it because of the OSPAP program?
So like the visa rules change all the time. So any prospective students who want to come over to the UK and then do the OSPAP course, whoever is here and they want to do the OSPAP course, they need to look that up. But when I did my course, I had to switch visa categories multiple times. And every time when you're doing that, there is a fee associated with it. And you have to wait until the whole application goes through. So I came over on a student visa, and then I was working here. But then because I wanted to do the OSPAP course again, I had to go back onto the student visa. And then once I finished that, I had to find a sponsor that would give me sponsorship, because that's another hurdle that international students will find. So back in those days when I did my pre-reg, you could find a sponsor in hospital pharmacy or in a retail pharmacy. I did the whole oral application thing and interview with 4 different hospitals and few community pharmacies. At that point, I chose Stoke Mandeville Hospital and then completed my pre-reg year with them. But when I finished my pre-reg and I went on to the GPHC register as a pharmacist, I then had to find another work sponsor. So somebody who would sponsor me to work as a pharmacist. And those requirements constantly change. So I was lucky enough to find the person who I used to work for before, who gave me that helping hand in that phase. So when I finished my pre-reg in Stoke Mandeville Hospital and went back to community pharmacy, so I used to work for, and I'm sure that she wouldn't mind mentioning her name, my employer at that point was somebody called Bhavini. So she basically said, look, I've got a job, but it's hard work. Would you be able to do it? So that involved working next to a big hospital called Croydon Hospital at that point. So it would involve 13-hour shifts. You would start work at 9 o'clock and you would work till 10 o'clock. You would have basically everybody who would go to hospital, find out that they have to wait 4 hours, coming into community pharmacy to ask you if you can do anything to help them. But the way I looked at it at that point is it's going to be a massive learning curve for me, and nobody's going to be able to give me that landing pad. So I learned so much in that period where every patient that came to me, if I didn't know the answer, I would tell them, why don't you go into the hospital? Because I don't know the answer. But when you come back, let me know what they say. So the next patient that I get to see, I would know that much more about what to counsel them on, what else I can tell them. So I was doing those shifts next to the busy hospital pharmacy. And then I decided to do locum work alongside that. So I get exposure to working in different environment, different settings, how each pharmacy works. Try and sponge off knowledge from different pharmacists that I work with, and have my own routine. Try and find out what would suit to my personality. And when I decide to buy my own pharmacy, because that was always my long-term aim, how can I incorporate all of those things, all of those mistakes which I made, and have a pharmacy which the staff will be happy to work in, the patients would be happy to walk in to get the services from, and I would be happy to work in that pharmacy at the same time as well. So in terms of the visa requirements, it changes all the time, but you just need to be resilient, open, and you need to adapt to whatever is thrown at you, essentially. So it could mean that you would have somebody who would sponsor you, and you would have to tie yourself to that company. But use that phase to learn as much as you can. Develop all the services that you thought you would want to do one day when you buy your own pharmacy, if that's what you wanted to do. So I wanted to do travel vaccine service, and the pharmacy was not offering that. So it's about like getting new skills. I did like my own project, and I said like, look, if I did the travel vaccination service, this is how much it's going to cost you to market the service, to put the posters out, to reach out to the GP surgeries, to the community, social media campaign, but I would bring this much money back. So by doing that, the employer that I was working for like recognized that I was actually doing something more than what other pharmacists would do. But at the same time, I was gaining all those skills on how I can transfer those skills into in future whenever I wanted to buy my own pharmacy.
Oh, Brijesh, that was awesome because you've just given us so much insight into the need to adapt to new environments, your dedication, and you're so hardworking, and you put a positive spin on things that can be quite overwhelming when you're navigating a new country and a new landscape. And I love that you exposed yourself to multiple different environments, to learn what you like and explore, build a network and understand like the different types of people that you're going to meet in your pharmacy journey in the different healthcare settings. It really gave you exposure to the NHS as well as alongside private kind of care in terms of community pharmacy and how that all fits in with the health service overall. So your actual knowledge of the general health service and what's offered to patients and how a pharmacist fits in will have expanded massively during that time. So I love that you utilized so many of these opportunities to become a better version of yourself, and just a massive learning curve. And sometimes when you're in it at the time, it just feels really daunting because there's so much going on. But at the same time, you had a long goal. You had that thought in your head that what do I need to do to put myself in the best position to own a community pharmacy and be a successful owner of a community pharmacy as well. So everything from actually running the pharmacy, but you're also thinking about, well, what type of manager do I want to be? What type of employer would I like to be? And how do I want to manage the people that come and work for me and make sure that they're happy? I love that you used that everything was about making sure that people around you are happy in that environment, especially the patients as well. So I really like that you shared that part of the journey. And I can see now why you are so successful in owning multiple pharmacies, because you are constantly learning from things that you're doing, maybe your mistakes that you've made, or choices or decisions that you've made that have or haven't worked, and then probably amending those and adapting to the environment. I mean, working abroad is a shift in mindset because it's not your home country, but also you don't feel as settled in that country simply because it's not your own. And I've experienced that living in the UAE. It was so hard for me because everything that you do relies on that visa. So when I initially moved out to the UAE, I was on a tourist visa, which lasts 30 days. And it's literally stamping your passport, go into the country. You've got 30 days to do whatever it is that you want to do, whether you're enjoying yourself, holidaying, and then you've got a date where you have to exit. And so for the first sort of 10 months that I lived there, having struggled to find a job for so many months and navigating what pharmacy had to offer in another country, which was very different to the UK landscape, every month I had to drive to Oman and cross the border, get a stamp in my passport, and do a U-turn in the car, in my little rental. I had a little Nissan Micra, do my little U-turn and come back into the country for an extra 30 days. And I did that for nearly a year, and it was torture. It was hard. It was really difficult to kind of navigate that. And without a visa, an employment visa, you can't get a bank account. You can't get a phone, like a mobile phone SIM card or a subscription for your phone. So I was taking out money internationally from my NatWest bank account in the UK. I was using a SIM card that was purchased from, my husband, which had limited credit on it. It wasn't a really good package at the time. Even renting a car, I had to rent it using my international and my UK driving license. So it cost more in terms of insurance and things like that. And it was really difficult to transition. And I experienced some other kind of challenges with kind of living on a visa when I had Liliana as my first child and coming into the country. So I came home to give birth. And then when I returned, I obviously have to navigate giving her a visa. And my employer agreed to sponsor her for a visa. And there was some challenges that we had to face upon returning to the UAE and getting her a visa. And at that 30-day mark where we were so close to going overdrawn on our 30 days, I had to drive with her to Oman and kind of like breastfeed in the car and all sorts on the side of the road just to get to Oman and then do that U-turn and kind of get back in because the visa from my employer wasn't ready yet. So there were just, it's very unsettling when you have to navigate that. But I think I wish I had known a lot of these things before moving to the country. I wish I had researched all of the challenges that I would face mentally and emotionally. I just enjoyed the journey and it was very spontaneous and I was kind of winging it. But I think now there is so much available to us, whether it's websites or YouTube videos or people who've done this journey, that you can learn from them. So people who are watching this video will learn so much from you in terms of things that you explored in your own journey, and the fact that visa requirements change so often and you just need to keep in touch with what the options are, what's the eligibility, how often do you need to kind of switch visas. And I am aware there are multiple students that I currently teach at King's College London who are here on international student visas, and then they're going into their training year, and sometimes some of the NHS trusts who have agreed to hire them, once they've been to interview stage, they haven't managed to get that visa at that hospital and have had to switch locations in terms of work. And that can be quite unsettling. So that adaptability piece and that resilience piece is really, really important when you are moving countries, but also just knowing that everything is going to work out and everything's just going to be okay. But you just have to make sure that your mindset is kind of like strong enough to persevere with all of those kind of obstacles or little speed bumps that kind of come your way when you're an international kind of student or citizen.
I think what pharmacists from whichever country they graduated from need to recognize is that you've got so many transferable skills. You've learned the basics. So the only thing that you would need to essentially learn would be like how pharmacies work here and which stream, which route do you want to take. So my advice to anybody who wants to, current pharmacy student or OSPAP student or overseas pharmacist looking into coming over here, is to try and research as much as they can. I wish like we had like podcasts like this when I decided to do my OSPAP, because it would have definitely changed the decisions that I took at that point. So part of the reason for us to share this is basically to spread awareness to other students. I always say, like Brighton University, which is closest to my pharmacies, any students who apply for part-time role, I always say, come and work during your term break. Experience the community pharmacy. See for yourself whether you actually want to work in there or not when you qualify. A lot of students who are currently looking at Oriel for the 4th year, they've texted me, emailed me, and they've said, okay, can I come and work in your pharmacy so I can actually know like how it works. And I would actually say anybody who's looking into doing their pre-reg year, if you had the opportunity, take that route, because that exposure is invaluable. And the time that you will spend in the pharmacy, you would basically see whether you would enjoy that 1 year that you would spend in that pharmacy, because it is a long task and it's really hard when you finished your pharmacy degree and you're studying to then become a pharmacist, pre-reg year is hard. So you want to be in the environment where you're supported, and also you're learning a lot of things as well. So I would really support anybody who would want to do the pre-reg to, if they've applied for any of my pharmacies, feel free to contact me. I'm more than happy for them to come over, visit the pharmacy, spend some time in there and get the feel for it.
You're so kind. It's really good that you have been through your experience, because now you know what it feels like. You're happy to support other people on their journey, and you also want, obviously, people to thrive and enjoy what pharmacy has to offer. And I say this all the time to my students when I'm teaching, is that use this opportunity whilst you are a student to learn more about yourself, to learn about what interests you, what you get excited about, what you're passionate about within the pharmacy degree, and expose yourself to that environment in a workplace, whether it's an internship, a placement, weekend working, your long summer break and kind of working in a community pharmacy. You won't know if you like it unless you're genuinely exposed to it. It's not necessarily the same as when you are a student and you get put on placements through the university, because during that time you are shadowing, you're observing, you have a workbook that you most likely have to complete, but it's not the same as actually working and doing the job on a day-to-day basis and understanding where you fit in and whether or not you're going to like being in that one pharmacy. For me, I worked in community pharmacy throughout my university degree. I wanted the money because I love traveling so much. So for me, it was about saving money in order to explore and go on multiple adventures. That was my 100% my mission, but also to have independence. I was still living with my parents at that time, so it was just nice to have money to be able to do whatever I wanted to, whether it was go out with friends or go out in London. A lot of my friends and family members, like cousins who were of my age, they were all working by the time that I started pharmacy, because I did 2 degrees, did my biology degree in the US as a bachelor's for 4 years. And then most of my friends obviously started working. Whilst then I decided to do pharmacy, which was going to be another 4 to 5 years of working weekends and trying to scrape every penny that I could in order to enjoy what the rest of my kind of friendship network was able to do, because they had a full-time job. And I loved the community pharmacy because of that community feel where you get to know your patients on a day-to-day basis. You get to know their family members. You get to know the details of their kind of life and their personal lives, which just brings so much joy in terms of conversation when people walk into the pharmacy and you just know who they are and can say hello to them with their first name. That makes a massive difference to me in terms of connection. I really love that I could be able to give non-pharmaceutical advice as well as pharmaceutical advice during those working hours. And I loved being able to also then go into the back of dispensary and do lots of labeling, dispensing, checking, CDs and all the other things that you get exposed to. But for me, being in just one location where you're in that kind of pharmacy and dispensary was quite hard for me. I don't know if it's like claustrophobia, I would say, but I just love the variety of being in a hospital where 1 minute you're in the office, the next minute you're on the ward, or you might be in a clinic, you might go to an MDT, which is in a doctor's office, and then you might be in the dispensary. And actually physically being able to move to different locations was really valuable for me in terms of the variety. And just having different skills being used at every opportunity, which you can get in community pharmacy. Absolutely, you can get it, because you might be on the counter, then you might be providing travel advice or doing vaccination clinic. You obviously have patients who come in who want that privacy. You go into the consultation room and you're able to provide services from that point of view. But for me, it was just nice to be able to work in different ward areas as well and just get that exposure. So as a student, I think it's really valuable to do as much as you can, whether you're on the OSPAP program or not. It's just really learning about who you are, about what you want out of life, what you like in terms of your routine. Do you want to do hospital shifts, for example, which are much longer? Or do you like that aspect of 9 to 5 and knowing that every day you're going to get home at a certain time and can kind of clock out from work and manage kind of like your work-life balance from that point of view. Hospitals, you've got to do night shifts and on-calls and different things, weekend working, which is slightly different to a community role. And then if you go into industry, man, it's completely different working environment. So learning more about yourself and what brings you a lot of joy is really valuable at that stage when you've got the freedom to do it. And I have found that a lot of students who transition from sort of A levels to university, that initial switch is quite hard because a lot of the learning is very independent once you get to university, unlike when you are an A-level student, where again, you do get so much support from your school or your college. But then that transition from finishing university and stepping into your pre-registration, placement for that entire training year, you are an employee. You're getting paid to do a job, but you are forced to also study at the same time and prepare for this exam, gain evidence, write evidence, prove your worth in that role. So there is so much going on. So that transition is quite challenging if you haven't worked in a pharmacy before. So that's why I think it's really useful to step into lots of different locations during your university to kind of expose yourself. So thank you so much for just sharing all of that information, Brijesh, about your journey over to the UK, the culture differences, what the OSPAP program's like, kind of how you survived in terms of the financial side of things, the culture differences. I'd like to take a quick break so we can hear from our partners. But when we are back, I would love to hear about your journey in terms of becoming a pharmacy owner. So watch this space. We'll be back in a minute. Hi. I've been looking at some recent clinical studies that have shown promising results for curcumin in joint health. Curcumin is the active ingredient in turmeric, which you have most likely used when cooking delicious curries. One study found curcumin extracts to be as effective as ibuprofen for the treatment of knee osteoarthritis, but without the side effects. It is a powerful and natural anti-inflammatory agent and soothes joint and muscle discomfort. Naturaflex turmeric, made by the Naked Pharmacy, capitalizes on these findings, providing a high-strength and well-absorbed supplement. If you are interested in a natural alternative backed by scientific research, Naturaflex presents a compelling option. Explore the potential at the Naked Pharmacy and use discount code PD20 for 20% off your purchase today. So welcome back to the episode, and I would love to kind of kickstart this section of the podcast episode talking about your journey as a business owner. So when you were working as a pharmacist, you've qualified, you've done your training year, and you're a qualified pharmacist. What did you do to prepare yourself to become a business owner in the UK?
When I was working back in Superdrug, I always had the vision from that point that one day I wanted to buy my own pharmacy. And there are multiple reasons for it. And it wasn't purely just from like the monetary gains that you get from it. It's just having systems in place that patients will appreciate, the staff will appreciate, and you would enjoy working in there. Because quite a lot of pharmacies were working in the multiple pharmacies would basically say that is all sort of like head office driven. You were given targets, you're given like stuff to do. You don't have too much control over actually what you can do. You lose that flexibility on the ground level. What I wanted to do was to buy a pharmacy, but not on a busy high street, just to make money. I wanted to buy a pharmacy in the rural areas where essentially I can establish the pharmacy as part of the community. But also that meant that the pharmacy has to be financially viable. So it's just like not just this wild dream that you have where you wanted to do something, but it's financially, it's a no-go. So that involved learning quite a lot about what the pharmacy business actually is. And whilst you're working as a locum and you're exposed to different pharmacies, you get to know the good practices from each pharmacy setting. But you also then slowly get into the managerial role where you learn about the revenue streams. You learn about what is it that's making this pharmacy survive. Because lately it's really hard to be like a pharmacy owner in the current climate that we're in. So how do you then adapt, make changes that are needed to then keep thriving and then keep making the pharmacy business a successful business? So years ago, like we used to do just like pharmacy valuation based on how many prescriptions pharmacy is doing. I don't think I would advise anybody to follow that model now. It has to be based on what are the gaps in that area. So you need to learn quite a lot about where the pharmacy is located. What is it currently offering? You as a pharmacy owner, on the day when you get the keys, what is it that you're going to do different to what the previous owners are doing? How is that going to translate into actually the cash flow and the business actually thriving? What is it that you need to do to get to that place where you want to be from where you are now? Maybe doing independent prescribing course, which I've started doing now. So there's never a phase where you can say, okay, I'm going to put my feet up and I'm now a business owner. I've owned the pharmacy, so I don't really need to do anything more. Nobody teaches you like the managerial side of things in the pharmacy school. That's really important. The moment you qualify and you start working as a pharmacist, you are the leader in that branch. You are leading a team of how many people you're working with. So different people will have different level of interest in the pharmacy. They bring different skill set. They've got different level of experience. How do you utilize each person's skill set to meet overall aims of that pharmacy, that branch? So you learn all of this whilst you're working in the pharmacy. I wouldn't advise anybody to buy pharmacy straight after you become a pharmacist. Also, don't buy the pharmacy just thinking, okay, I'm going to buy a pharmacy just because like I'm thinking I'm going to be financially so much better off. Because the first year and a half, seriously speaking, you're going to be better off locuming rather than becoming a pharmacy owner. So you're going to have sleepless nights. You're going to have long hours. After the pharmacy is closed, you're doing a lot of admin tasks. It's dealing with the GPHC. It's making sure all the regulatory side of things are done. It's making sure like managerial side of things are done. You're carrying out staff reviews regularly, stocking up pharmacy for everything that patient needs to buy, training yourself up for all the services that's coming in future. More importantly, learning about what is it that's making that pharmacy profitable and how can you attribute and contribute to making it more profitable. So there's a lot of different things. So it's not something that sort of like came to me one day, but it was a journey over so many years. And take breaks. So don't burn yourself. So in between me working full time, doing crazy shifts and locuming, and then buying a pharmacy, I always had in my long-term plans that one day I'm going to pack everything up and go on travels. So that's what my wife and I did. We did 6 months around the world tour. So when I came back, I was refreshed and I wanted to go on a round 2, which involved even more dedication, even more hard work. So look, if anybody wants to buy pharmacy and they're looking at pharmacies, reach out to me on LinkedIn. More than happy to give my opinion on whether you're going down the right path or not. But it's also about having the right context. So throughout the year of working in different pharmacies, I could reach out to somebody and say, hey, I'm doing this, but what do you think? Is it actually a good idea? The employer who gave me sponsorship visa, when I decided to buy a pharmacy and I went to her, she said, look, Brijesh, I wish you all the best. If you're stuck at any point, give me a call. I'll give you my advice. But in my role, if anybody else wants to do it, to pass the baton and give that information to them. So quite a lot of things that basically you need to think about. But is it rewarding? Yes. Is it hard? It is really hard.
But is it, I guess, I mean, it must be financially successful. You have 4 now, and it's definitely hard work, but from a general rewarding perspective from the patients, the community, the staff that you obviously manage and are part of your team, they become part of your family, don't they? Your extended family. So all of that is rewarding. But a lot of people who watch this video or listen to this episode will be thinking from a financial point of view, is their financial success with owning a pharmacy? Because we are seeing more and more that a lot of pharmacies in the high street are closing down. as well as new ones opening up, but I am seeing quite a lot on pharmacies closing down. So is it successful to buy a pharmacy, and can you make it work for you?
It's a mixture of both. You need to have like the right patient facing expectations and what you're going to be able to bring, and also need to have like commercials, like awareness of what is right and what's wrong. So I give you an example. During COVID vaccination phase, the first patient that came back and had COVID was not too far from the pharmacy where I am based. So overnight, you suddenly thinking, what's going to happen to all the villages that you're looking after if your pharmacy is closed? But at the same time, those patients who would need vaccinations, they might not want to go miles to end. So how can you offer that service locally so the patients will benefit? Obviously, the NHS is going to give you money to be able to provide that service. You weigh up the option of, is there a capacity for you to provide that service? Is there a monetary gain? Versus, is the patients going to need that service and would they benefit from it? So that tricky balance is always going to be there in every decisions that you take. So for COVID vaccinations, when the local surgery decided they didn't want to carry out the COVID vaccinations because of the winter pressures, my pharmacy was too small. So how do you then make that transition? Commercially, I had to make a decision of getting rid of all the shelves in the pharmacy. So when you come in the pharmacy, you won't be able to find your hairbrush or whatever else that you would have normally be able to find. You won't be able to find the 10 pens. You won't be able to find the other products that you would have normally been able to find. I replaced all of that with the screens and the chairs and socially distanced positions of those chairs. I reached out to the community and I said, look, instead of everybody having to go 2 miles to and have the vaccinations, I'll provide this from here. What do you think about it? The next I know is the community had their own volunteering rota. They were bringing in coffees and teas. They were managing like patients who were waiting outside for 15 minutes or so. And whilst we needed to observe them whilst they're in the pharmacy. So it's a mixture of having the community engagement, commercial awareness of what's right, but never lose your sight of why you are doing that and whether it will be beneficial for the patients that you're looking after or not. So that is true for any service that you offer. So whether or not pharmacy would be viable or not commercially, you're looking at list of private services to top up the revenue that you're going to get from NHS. But if there is a pharmacy down the road who is offering all the services that you were going to offer and the market is saturated, would you then be commercially viable to open up another pharmacy and provide those services from there? As opposed to if you did like a SWOT analysis and found out what you would bring to the table. So advice to anybody who's looking into buying a pharmacy, have a look on the pharmaceutical needs assessment that's published in every area. Those are the normal areas of focus for that local ICB. Try and find out if you can tailor your services to better meet the health needs in that area, and if those services are already being offered by other pharmacies. But it would also need like input from like an accountant or somebody who's savvy in like pharmacy business. So pharmacists would be more eager to like dive straight into and buy pharmacies and like say over expect, because I'm one of those. I over expected on what I could deliver. But then when you talk to somebody who's dealt with pharmacy sales and pharmacy transactions, they would bring you in check with this is what is realistic. In order for you to get bank funding, this is what they're looking for. So even before like you put any money on the table, you can do all of those research. And I'm more than happy to help anybody who is looking into doing that. So 3-phase approach is the way I look at it. First of all, prep yourself for whenever in the future you want to buy a pharmacy. Do your market research. Get professional help and advice from people who also know what they're doing. And then look into buying a pharmacy.
Awesome. I guess when you bought your first pharmacy, what were the things about that pharmacy that made it appealing to you as the buyer? What were the things that you really liked about it, or you thought that would be really useful as a business owner, or the services that you thought, yeah, I really want to do this and I can't wait to help and support this small community in this rural setting?
So I studied in Brighton Uni to do my OSPAP course. And the first pharmacy that came up in the market was in that area. So I was aware of the area itself. I did my research. By that phase, I was already trained to do those services. Then I researched into what the pharmacy was actually offering. I contacted the local GP surgeries. I asked the pharmacist who was currently selling the pharmacy why were they actually selling the pharmacy. I thought of what I could bring to the table. So that pharmacy was serving the community for over 30 years, and they were doing it really well. So every patient who got medicines prescribed, got their medicines delivered to them, or like was ready for them to collect. But because that pharmacist was working in a different way, where they were not able to delegate tasks to other staff members, they were not ready to take on other clinical services. So the question that I had to ask myself is, how do I then upskill the team that I had to be able to do more of the services so that I can take a step back and focus on the things that I wanted to do, but overall aim being the patients that are currently not getting their new medicine service, their MURs, their travel vaccine service, their earwax removal service, their flu vaccination service. How are they getting those services whilst I'm safely delivering the day-to-day tasks that pharmacist was doing for 30 years? And that is the same model that I'm applying now to all the other pharmacies. If you came to any of my pharmacies, it would be very rare that you would find the pharmacist itself doing the earwax removal, the initial part of travel vaccination, the initial part of pharmacy first consultation, or COVID or the flu jab. So the staff that I'm working with, they are thinking that they're not only doing the day-to-day dispensing, and it becomes like a chore for them. And at the same time, I'm involving technology, recent advancement of whatever needs to be done in the pharmacy to make everything that I do more safe. And then if you do all of those things essentially, an answer is yes, the patients will still benefit from it and it's financially still viable, then you would basically proceed to buying that pharmacy. It took nearly 6 months for the first phase, where you're just establishing yourself in the community, you're covering the basics. So a simple thing as buying stock. When you're buying a pharmacy, don't forget you're still buying a stock, which the business loan is not going to cover. So do you have sufficient reserves to cover that? And for the first few months, you probably might not be able to draw anything from the pharmacy, because the way NHS business works is like you don't get paid for the prescriptions that you would have done or the services you would have done straight away. So are you going to be able to support yourself during that phase? So it's those things that we needed to basically ask ourselves. So my wife is a pharmacist, and she continued like in her journey in the hospital pharmacy, whilst I continued in the retail pharmacy. There was a phase where I wasn't bringing anything on the table. But you need to ask those questions to yourself when you're buying a pharmacy, because that might not be true for everybody. You might be the only person in the family who's actually bringing money to the table. And would you be able to survive? Would you be able to pay your mortgage and all the other expenses that you've got? So all of those things essentially need like quite a detailed and thorough looking into before somebody decides to buy a pharmacy. But to your original question, a lot of pharmacies are closing. Would you still buy it? Yes, if it's the right price and if you can input like things that I discussed, then yes. Because professionally, personally, and less importantly, financially, it would be rewarding. But you just need to be able to put in the hard yards initially and have the right people around you to make it work.
Yeah, that is really good information. Thank you so much for providing that insight. And it really makes me think as well that as a student, that obviously young pharmacy students at this point who are like 19, 20 years old, some of them are thinking about owning a pharmacy and they're trying to find information about what it's like to be a pharmacy owner. But I think you kind of need to think outside the box here a little bit. You've got to find your own ways because no one's going to give you those answers. No, that information is currently not really readily available online, where you can kind of Google search it or maybe YouTube search it. Maybe there might be a couple of videos, but it's not information that's readily available where you feel like you're getting the education that you need to make that decision for yourself. And you have to obviously find a network of individuals. Is there actually any groups that are available, whether it's WhatsApp, Facebook, LinkedIn, where there are multiple kind of pharmacy owners who support each other or support new pharmacy owners coming into this?
So in and around Brighton, we've got like WhatsApp groups for independent pharmacists. So where we share information to each other and anything that we find useful or different, we share that information with each other. So I think there are WhatsApp group and there's more support available now for anybody else who's going to come in now, maybe through your ICB, other independent pharmacists. Again, my advice is reach out to people, try and network with people who are around you. So I had a Lloyd's pharmacy close to me. Traditionally, you would think that's your competitor pharmacy and you won't even reach out to them. I had a really good relationship with that pharmacist. And when I started doing the COVID vaccinations, I asked him, why don't you come and help me? And when you're not working, it's not affecting your contract. You are still allowed to do it in the weekend. You get the exposure of doing the COVID vaccinations privately, and I get a trained personnel. But from that point onwards, if I had any prescription queries with that pharmacist, he would be readily available on the other end of the phone, but he would also know what kind of person we are as well. Because it's always really important to build that connection. A few years down the line, when Lloyd's pharmacy disappeared, I actually employed that pharmacist to work in my other branch. But if you didn't make that first approach, you're not going to be able to basically have that relationship. So if somebody's a new contractor in the area, my advice would be reach out to the other pharmacy owners who are also in the area. So I also wear a hat of a PCN lead in the area that my pharmacies are in Brighton. That would involve me actually going to those pharmacies, sitting down with the pharmacist in those pharmacies, finding out what is it that they are finding difficulty in communicating with the GP surgeries. Recently, through those communications, we've established a model where a lot of pharmacists who are working in the GP settings would know where on system one, you need to meet your Q or QOF scores. To be able to meet that, you have to declare that everybody over the age of 40 have had their blood pressure checked regularly. If the surgery is oversubscribed, community pharmacies can offer that service. But it's about having those connections. So in Lewis area, now we've built this network where every week, 100 referrals would be sent to different community pharmacies. Community pharmacies will do a blood pressure check for those. Results will be sent to the GP. And if that means those patients would not have like cardiovascular events later down the line because their blood pressure was checked routinely, then it's a welcome initiative. So it brings monetary benefit to the pharmacy. It's a good service for the local community. The GP surgeries tick off their QOF points as well. So collaborative approach, basically reach out to your local PCN pharmacist, the GP pharmacist, and other contractors working in the same area. And it's a common misconception that nobody's going to like talk to you, nobody will give you advice. But we're all pharmacy professionals. If somebody came to me and asked for advice, I'll be more than happy to give them the advice that I could give them. So there are WhatsApp groups, there are professional channels, there are like your PCN leads who would come and see you if you are a new pharmacy buyer. But more importantly, just go out and speak to them.
And I guess one of my last questions is that after you bought your first pharmacy and you thought it's time and I'm ready to step up to buying pharmacy number 2, then 3, then 4, what were the things that you learnt in that journey, whether it's mistakes that you kind of made, whether it was obstacles that you came across where you had to problem solve? or things that you thought, I could do this better next time, or when I go for round 2, 3, and 4, what were those things that you learned that were really valuable for you?
I think learning that every community is different, every pharmacy is different, every set of team brings their own skill set, and then how do you then manage that? So the transition from being a business owner and a pharmacist who was working in the pharmacy full time to somebody who also had to take managerial responsibility. Um, so I was looking after the marketing for the pharmacy. I was looking at the logos for the pharmacy. I was looking at the payroll for the pharmacies. I was doing the staff appraisals, whilst also making sure like the basics were covered. If the GPHC inspector walked into any of my branches, where they will find that the service was to safe standard. So it's about like taking time to basically answer those questions that I sort of like asked myself initially, but also realizing the limitations that you can't be at more than one place. So you need to have like that golden thread where you have people in each branch that you can train and you can rely on to tell you if something wasn't right, if the business wasn't going in the right direction. And it's still a learning curve. So every day I still try to learn, like, okay, what is it that I need to do to be a better pharmacy owner, better pharmacist, better manager? And then it's a journey. So, but those things were essentially something that I learned along the way, where you need to value your staff. And I can't say highly about the staff that currently works for me. If I'm not in any of the branches, I know that they're going to do what is best for the business. But more importantly, they're not going to let the local community down. And they will do everything to step out of their way to help support that community. But as I said, like every day you're still trying to get, okay, I could have done this differently. I could have done that differently. But overall, I'm satisfied with the way the things are going. If like there was the right pharmacy, the right price, would I go for it? Probably not at this step. But in future, if something happened, yeah, why not?
So you're not done yet. So number 4 is a lucky number, but you might still think about expanding.
I always like to challenge myself. So as you can see, like from whatever I've said so far, if something came my way and if I thought that I could do it, then I will go for it, but not at the moment.
And your wife is loving hospital pharmacy, doesn't want to go into the business side of things with you as your partner. Is she very settled in her role?
She actually likes what she does and she's settled in her role. So it's nice to have somebody who I could talk to at the end of the day and talk about like the pharmacy pressures. But then at the same time, she's in her own journey. So she's a specialist heme pharmacist and then she loves her role. She likes what that role brings to her. So she's happy with what she's doing. But at the end of the day, having somebody who's also a pharmacist also helps because you can then have those ideas that you've got discuss with her and then see what her opinion on that is. She keeps me in check. Sometimes I'm more optimistic and then she's sort of like, actually, you need to wait for a little bit longer or you need to do this slightly differently. So really valuable to have like that support network around you. So in your previous podcast, you mentioned about like having parents around to look after childcare. So I've got a 22-month-old. Having my in-laws around, having my wife around to help support with everything is also important. So if somebody's looking into buying a pharmacy, you also think about the other factors which would affect your life and how can you manage those things as well.
Absolutely. You need your tribe. I call it my tribe. My parents are definitely part of my tribe. They help me a lot, but also people within my network as a podcaster or as a hospital pharmacist and a university lecturer. My network is so big that I know whenever I face a problem or I've got a hurdle that I need to kind of cross, that I've got multiple people that I can go to. I mean, my number one fan is my husband, and, he's my partner in crime in so many ways. So he is the first person that I would go to for support. But yeah, my parents used to be pharmacy owners. They know a lot about pharmacy as well, though they're not pharmacists. So when it comes to my career, they're great to bounce ideas from. My dad would have loved it if I was a pharmacy owner, I think. But I just found personally that I've always had an employee mindset that is shifting now that I'm an entrepreneur in terms of this podcast. But for me, the idea of owning a pharmacy did feel quite overwhelming. It definitely sounds very rewarding, and I loved working in community pharmacy. So being part of that local network and supporting the people around you who live in that area, having a team or a family of kind of like pharmacy staff who you work with, it just all sounds very wholesome and rewarding and enjoyable. And you go on that journey together as a team, which is so amazing. But I just think taking on all that responsibility takes a certain type of person. And I'm shifting into that mindset because now that I'm an entrepreneur, I love this podcast. I want to make it something that I can rely on for income to support my family, to pay my mortgage, to pay my bills. And I'm already starting to shift my mindset in terms of what type of employer do I want to be? What type of team members do I want? What type of tribe do I want to build? And I'm doing it in, I guess, a way that's a little bit slower in terms of the pace of making it a reality and my own pace. Because if you buy a pharmacy and it's already up and running, you take all of the staff with you and you're responsible for them and the customers and yourself and the business all at once. And for me, that's like, whoa, intimidation. But for some people like you, Brijesh, you thrive in that environment and it's awesome. Like it seems like you're perfect for this type of responsibility. And it just sounds like you've had such an incredible journey to date and you've done so much with your career. It's been great that you've moved countries. You're obviously married and you're settling down into family life. But like how exciting you've got a pharmacist as a wife as well. That's super cool. And I'm so glad that we got the opportunity to chat on this podcast. And I'm very grateful that you've offered support to my audience, to listeners or people watching this video. Where is the best place for them to connect with you or have that conversation or maybe reach out to you to maybe jump onto a phone call or a virtual conversation for advice?
Yeah, if they drop in a message on LinkedIn, I'm more than happy to look into it and then give them anything that I can do from my point of view.
Awesome. And thank you so much for your time, your energy, and your honesty on today's episode. I really appreciate spending time with you, getting to know you. And I am sure that everybody watching this video or listening to this podcast episode will be very grateful as well for the information you've provided. Do you ever feel like your body is sending you error messages, but you can't read the manual? You're not alone. That happens to me too. I am a pharmacist by background, and I'm excited to tell you about a product called Metabolic Gold. It's like a universal translator for your body. Maybe your cholesterol is acting up, or your blood sugar is on a roller coaster, or your digestive system is doing the cha-cha. Metabolic Gold speaks all those languages. With its unique blend of bergamot, artichoke, and baobab, it's got your back, and your front, and your insides. Are you ready to decode your body's signals? Grab Metabolic Gold from the Naked Pharmacy and use code PD20 for 20% off your purchase. Problem solved? Mystery cracked.